All right, hi everyone. This is Dylan Taggart from 360 Insights, coming in with the latest episode of the Tech Chat. I'm here with Keith Meyerson from Kam Consulting Group. Keith is an expert in learning and talent, and he's got a storied history. And we're going to be picking his brain today about everything learning and talent, recruiting, and a bunch of other subjects that I'm sure you're going to find interesting. Keith, if you want to do a brief intro for yourself, let the people know who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I appreciate you having me. So I've been in learning and talent development better part of 20 years. I've run L&D shops for some major organizations. I've been with Tiffany and Company, Neiman Marcus, Top Golf, most recently Powder, which if you know the Woodward brand, they're part of Powder. And now I'm out on my own. So I just really enjoy kind of the marriage between technology and execution and helping businesses solve their problems. Just I happen to do it through people.
Nice. And that's kind of what we're going to be discussing today a bit. I know just from looking at your work, you focus on two areas that I thought were very interesting that I'd like to touch on. One being kind of the managing of deskless workers and kind of how to enable them. It feels like there's always a lot of focus on people in the office, people working in more traditional corporate settings, how to enable them, how to train them. But in the more varied environments that come with being a deskless worker, it seems like there's a bit more, there's elements of randomness that occur that you have to take into account, be it the weather or holiday season or just the flow influx of people coming in or whatever it may be. So could you tell us a bit about how you approach that and your strategy for managing those types of workers?
Sure. And I'm going to start with a consultant's response, which is it depends, because it really needs to be unique to the organization, the industry, the culture. It's not a one size fits all. I mean, if you're talking hospitality in the restaurant business, which there's a lot of roller coaster events in there. I mean, they got hit with a pandemic, which was extremely rough for those in the service industry. And then with my most recent organization with Powder, where you're talking about people out skiing on a mountain. So are we talking about the volatility because of the seasonality in the market or the weather, or just the fact that we have younger generations that might be working part-time and then going back to school? And what's the recidivism? Are we getting them to come back time after time again? And a lot of the friction really becomes between the the hourly employee and their immediate supervisor. If that relationship isn't good, it's going to be hard to get people back. And how do we make sure that relationship's good? A lot of times it's through learning and development and making sure that team leads and supervisors actually know how to lead people and aren't just, really good operators that we've now put in a team lead position but don't know what they're doing, and which is why we have a multi-billion-dollar leadership development industry. So for me, it starts there. Do we have the right leaders in the right roles to address that before we even start talking about learning and development for those hourly workers? How are we supporting them with the right supervisory people to make sure that they're in a safe environment that encourages their development?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially because there's probably nothing more stressful for an employee than putting them in a position of leadership when they're not quite ready. And obviously, there should be a level of anxiety that comes with any new experience, but that level of anxiety could turn into resentment if they're not quite, if they feel like they've just been thrown in, I have no support, and situation like that. For Would you be able to give a kind of a real world example from your experiences of how maybe a situation was like that and how maybe your approach helped remedy it, or your approach, with future leadership candidates help change that?
Yeah, I think it's something that's ubiquitous in the industry. I mean, I think leadership development in North America, we'll stick with North America, is really predicated on the fact that we're going to take high performing individuals and then promote them into supervisory positions, but we don't give them any of the learning and development in advance. We don't teach them what it means to be a supervisor. We just throw them in the position whether they want it or not. We're not holding them accountable to the vision, the values, the competencies, because we've never articulated or defined what those are. And then we scratch our heads and wonder what the heck happened. Why aren't these people good people leaders? So one of the things I've done most recently in my most recent organization, we sat down and did discovery work with, okay, where are the pain points? What are we missing from the point of impact for the lowest level supervisors? And we called them level one, level two, which is kind of inverse when we think about leveling in an organization. But level one being those first time or first level supervisors who are supervising individual contributors, and then their supervisors. So you have the first two tiers of supervisory roles. And I spoke to all of the general managers and all the HR teams and all of our locations and came up with patterns on, what are we missing? And what we found was they were very transactional in their approach. They weren't transformational. And by that I mean they're echoing the and modeling behaviors of people that have gone before. So who are their role models? Well, their role models are people that have been bulls in china shops and have really, forced the labor numbers to be right, and have left the path of destruction, but they've gotten the good numbers. Meanwhile, they can't keep people, and their numbers are terrible from tenure perspective and employee engagement numbers and things of that nature. So how do we overcome that? Well, we looked at those and said, these are the things that we need to fix. We need to fix the culture. We need to fix the accountability. We need to change the understanding of what it means to be a people leader here. So that drove the creation of a management development program, which really focused on moving from the transactional behaviors to the transformational behaviors. And from an L&D perspective, training to me, the way I've defined training, it's the transfer of knowledge into performance ability. And unfortunately, I think for most learners, they view training as a compliance exercise. I took the training. Well, that doesn't mean you're trained. If something goes wrong in an organization, your stakeholders are typically, well, let's just put people through training. Well, as a program developer and someone that really understands adult learning, I think that's not how we learn, right? I can sit in front of an e-learning and take an hour e-learning on open heart surgery. No one's going to give me a knife the next day, right? That'd be crazy. But we have the same theory when it applies to any concept in an organization. So it was very important for me to set up a learning journey where people didn't just receive the knowledge, but then they had the opportunity to practice and collaborate and have social learning with peers in their cohorts, and then practice the concepts and fail and reflect and try again before we would actually go and apply these concepts out in their daily life. We wanted to create opportunities for people to be comfortable with a learning journey that was more than just taking a 30-minute e-learning and checking the box and being done. We found that to be tremendously beneficial. We recently had some employee engagement survey numbers that are actually pushing in the right directions. We're getting responses from the pilot group. I've been brought back to the organization as a consultant to continue developing the program because they find it's having demonstrable results. And then hopefully, we're going to be moving on to other leadership development programs outside of the management development programs. So it's possible, but you just have to have the organizational understanding and backing, and the mindset of how we look at learning is not a one-time static event.
That makes a lot of sense. And usually when you approach these scenarios, if you were to, take each group, so the employees and the managers into like, let's say a separate room, individually, and be like, okay, what are your top three issues with your manager, or what are your top three issues with learning and development? And then you were to take the manager and ask them the same question, and maybe they're going to be gripes about each other, or maybe they're just gripes in general about the approach. But do those tend to be overlapping at all, or are they always kind of siloed in their position and the way they look at the situation with learning and development?
The clean version is it's like everybody has a belly button. Everybody has an opinion, right? So I don't know how we got here in L&D, but everyone wants to tell us how to do our jobs. People are coming to us with the resolution being training, instead of coming to us and saying, hey, you guys are the experts. We don't even know if training is the right intervention. Can you help us? And more often than not, we're placed in a position of being able to scan the environment, help an organization really look at, well, what are your goals? Forget about what you think the problem is for a second. Let's talk about what the goals. And then we do our due diligence and our diagnosis and get to the root cause and then understand what all the variables are and separate the symptoms from the problems, and we come up with a holistic solution. And I think at the end of the day, as long as you are showing business impact, that's where you're going to get the credibility and that's where you're going to get the buy-in. This will probably upset anyone that's watching that really believes in Kirkpatrick levels of valuation. I find 3 of them completely worthless. I think they're great for us internally to QA the design of our programs, but my CFO doesn't care about Kirkpatrick, my CEO doesn't care, my COO, my CHRO. What do they care about? Did I solve their business problem? So I think while everyone is going to have an opinion, I think a lot of it is starting small, piloting programs, showing the wins, showing the business impact, and then building upon that. Once you're being able to demonstrate the fact that you've solved their business issue, whether it's a problem or it's exceeding a goal, then you're going to get the support and the relationship in the future where they're going to come to you and say, hey, I have this issue, can we talk about it? Versus, hey, by the way, I need training, which is a completely different conversation.
And what are those Kirkpatrick
Kirkpatrick levels of
metrics?
evaluation, yeah, they're standard. I'm trying to be nice so I don't offend everyone in L&D, but L&D seems to be one of
That's
the few disciplines that struggles with measuring their impact on the business or demonstrating value. So the Kirkpatrick levels of evaluation are for people to really, how do we report on what we've done? So level 1 we call smile sheets. It's, as a student you take a class and then you fill out, I liked it. Did the instructor talk too fast, too slow, things of that nature. Level 2, now you're talking about knowledge change. I took a test before and I scored a 60. I took a test afterwards and I scored 100. Again, in my mind, so what? Just because you scored 100 doesn't mean you can actually apply what you've learned. And we've proven that again and again and again. Level 3, now we're getting into behavior change, and we may put out a survey to say, okay, manager, this person has been 90 days out of training. Have you seen these changes in the behaviors? And a lot of people, the farther you go, level 1, level 2, level 3, they pat themselves on the back to say, well, we're showing the impact of our programs. And my argument has always been, we don't create learning and development for fun. There has to be a business reason, right? If we just ask people, what training do you want? Somebody can come back and say, I want to be scuba certified. Well, we're in finance, so that might not be the right course, that helps with the business, it might make you happy, but is it really relevant? What do we need to either better execute on our organizational goals, or what do we need to do to mitigate any skill gaps, or from a succession planning standpoint, how do we develop better strengths so we don't have knowledge loss when someone leaves and then someone wins the lottery and leaves and now we can't get something done. So for me, the focus is always on impact, and we struggle with that because we have a hard time isolating our contribution to business. So that's why I'm a huge advocate and proponent of isolating that by running A/B tests or running pilot groups, comp programs where we can actually say, we've taken a small group of people, we've given them specialized training. They've also been subject to every other variable in the organization, like sales changes, marketing, commercials, the economy. So now if I can demonstrate a positive impact with my test group, no one else in the organization can come by and say, well, we did a price change. Well, we did marketing. Well, we added this. Well, great. They were subject to that too. The only difference in my test group was the training. And I think that's the only way we're going to be able to show our value in an organization. Now, I will say this, most organizations don't think that way because the C level has been taught that, well, L&D's told us it's too hard to measure, so we're not going to hold them accountable. So we'll just be okay with some of these other metrics. And I just don't think we should be held to a different standard than anyone else in the organization.
And speaking of kind of standards, and I've heard you, and this is a related topic as well to the next question I'm going to ask you, which is I've heard you mention that, Gen Z and the new generations coming into work, they are requiring a different approach to training. Given that, and given that there are these standards like the ones you mentioned, is there kind of a new school of thought and a new, I guess, hierarchy of standards or a range of standards that are occurring where someone's like, okay, we're using this method now or this level of metrics to evaluate the situation with these new generation of employees, and that can be a kind of yes or no, or and if yes, how does that apply to the new generation of workers coming in and what approaches are being taken?
I haven't seen any changes of standards based on generational differences. What I will say from a learning design standpoint, there are some things that we need to reflect and understand. And one is, and I think this is happening at all generations, but more so with the newer generations in the workforce. We've seen attention spans diminish significantly, right? This is currently the TikTok generation. So if you're going to run an hour e-learning, you're going to have a challenging time, and even with SCORM or AICC and you can bookmark progress, that's great. But at the end of the day, is that what they really want? Is that going to excite them? And if they're not engaged and they're not interested in the training and they just tune out, then it's not serving anyone any good. And we also have to think about it in terms of how do people work? How can we meet them where they are in the flow of work? Couple years ago, I needed to change out an air cabin filter in my car. I didn't even know there was such a thing as an air cabin filter. So I went on YouTube. I found, my model. I went to the auto parts store. I got the filter. I came home. I watched a 2-minute YouTube video. I was done. I didn't have to stop my day to schedule a class to go sit in a room with 30 other people where we're talking about, car maintenance, and I only wanted this one piece. Well, I think that's very relevant in today's work environment. If I just need one piece of information, I don't want to sort through an hour's worth of content or a full day workshop. So we need to find ways of how do we push content to people or have them pull content that's specific to their immediate needs in the flow of work. And I think that's really reflecting of the new generation, but I think it's applicable to all generations.
Hmm. And that's interesting. I feel like it would make sense then that maybe companies start to have like kind of directories or YouTube, like, or maybe it's integrated with YouTube where it's like, okay, this what problem do you have today? And the kind of you will learn then piecemeal, kind of maybe one part at a time, one replacement part at a time, opposed to learning it all and then maybe some of it stays with you, but you've just learned too much at once and it's impossible for all that knowledge. If you learn 100 pieces of data, maybe 25 stay with you over the next few weeks, but maybe if you learn those 100 pieces in real time as you need them and in chunks opposed to all at once, is that proven to lead to higher retention of information perhaps, or
I think it needs to be, again, it depends. It depends upon what you're learning. Is it a professional skill? Is it a technical skill? Um, there's different ways to go about it. And one of the things I did years ago was I really started investing in social learning, which is really divesting ownership of training and development from a centralized team to the people in the field. I've always had this philosophy that the people that are closest to the problem are those that are closest to the solution. I'm so far removed, my team's so far removed, but people that are actually dealing with these issues on a day to day, they're probably going to have a solve for this. So why not empower them to be in learning communities where they can post, hey, I've seen this issue, this is how I've dealt with it. Think of a LinkedIn or a Facebook group where by topic, people can share best practices. So now you're getting knowledge capture, you're getting new ideas, you're getting innovation almost in real time. There's really a way to harness the learning and development of the group, and it's there was a lot of resistance at first. People, I had a CEO of a very well-known company that asked me how are they going to control the conversations, and I literally looked at her and asked her, tell me how you do that now. I mean, you can't control conversations, right? But you can steer them, just like you can with community standards in a LinkedIn group post, right? If somebody says something wrong or it goes against the company's values, people can steer it back in the right direction. So I think really empowering people to have those conversations at the lowest level is huge. Giving people the ability to upload videos and content of that nature, I think, is a great way to empower and engage your workforce. And think of all the time and effort it saves on the L&D team for constantly being behind the eight ball for all the needs of the organization that they possibly can't fill by themselves. So I think there's a lot of ways to go about addressing these things.
Hmm. Interesting to see. And I feel like it almost is a return. Well, obviously, like apprenticeships and stuff like that never really went away, but maybe it's a return to the popularity of that, where that is, or maybe that expands into not just the fields it was typically in, like bricklaying or more of a trades, but maybe into different environments that would not typically use those methods of learning, perhaps.
It could be. I mean, I've worked in companies that have, I was at Tiffany and Company for almost 11 years, and we had apprenticeships in hollowware because there's skill, but it's art that's passed down generationally. But I mean, I remember going to a conference years ago on the future of work, and somebody was talking about they were either at Lowe's, I think they were at Lowe's, and they were using social learning. And you have these corporate planners, these corporate merchandisers that send these things out to the field, and then it doesn't work because you've got somebody in corporate that doesn't understand what really goes on in the day to day. So then you have these very creative people in the field finding the fix and then getting onto their social learning platform and say, hey guys, I got the instructions for this. It's not going to work this way. Do it this way. And then everyone immediately, oh my God, this is great. It works, right? Problem solved. You're not going through iterations. You're not going through, well, we need, someone to come up with a new widget, or we need L&D to come up with a new training program. So I think harnessing the power of, look, we hire people in our companies because we trust them to sell our widgets or to work with our customers and to engage and represent our brand. Why wouldn't we trust them with these things as well? I mean, they're going to come up with things that we couldn't have possibly thought of. So I think the empowerment and the engagement all goes to everything we're looking to do in L&D. Again, like, why are we here? We're not here because we're a training company. We're here because we're supporting the business. So anything that we can do that supports that goal is going to be a win for everyone.
And I wanted to switch topics a little bit into more talent and recruitment. We often hear about this war for talent that's occurring, but I feel, and I do feel like that obviously that's coming from the the organizational and employer perspective. But on the flip side, I'm starting to see more stories and hear more stories about applicants who are applying to hundreds of jobs and not getting a response, or applying for months and months and months, and you know 400 or 500 applications later, they're fed up and wondering what's gone wrong. So, and it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect here between the war for talent and then the need that is said to be there, but applicants aren't really having that experience. How do those two ends meet here, and what's kind of happening to create that situation?
I think it's industry or skill specific. I think if you're looking at certain portions of the workforce, there's, I think, skilled labor. When you talk about manufacturing, I think there could be an argument made for there's a shortage there, or there's a gap there. And especially as we're transitioning from manufacturing more into the knowledge era, um, what are we looking at now? There's, in the past 5 years, there was a huge need for data scientists, and there weren't any, and that field's grown. What's emerging right now? It's AI, right? So that's the current gold rush. So I think if you look at it by specialized fields or industries, you're going to see some skill gaps. I think in general, and a lot of this, it's hard to really validate because it's media and we just can't trust what we read anymore, right? I don't know what facts are facts anymore because you're getting competing information. But I mean, I met with a guy yesterday who finally got a job after almost a year and 680 some odd applications. And that's a normal story. Like that's an average story. And so I think for people in my field, people in HR, in recruiting, in learning and development, talent management, we're typically the first to get cut when there's a layoff because we're constantly thought of as a cost center, not a profit center. And again, going back to measuring the impact of your programs, if you're not tying that to business impact and you're just coming back saying, we had 95% completion rates, woohoo, you're going to be number one on the chopping block, right? Because you're not showing the business impact to your organization. So I think for people that are in those areas, yeah, the ghosting is huge because from an organizational standpoint, the recruiters are inundated with hundreds and hundreds of applications, and it's a rough journey for qualified applicants because not only are they competing with everyone else that's out on the market, they're just trying to get through an ATS that an ATS being an applicant tracking system may or may not be configured well to allow the pass through. You also have people that are unemployed that, depending upon their state, are required to apply to a certain amount of jobs a week to continue to get their benefits. So they're applying to jobs that they're not even qualified for. So a job that would normally have 100 applicants now has 500 applicants because 400 of them aren't even qualified. They're just doing it to say that they've done it. So I see it as a huge issue. There's a huge complaint in the industry. Everyone just wants the easy button to apply, but on the company side, they want to be more efficient. They run more filters. They're now using AI, which you can make arguments if that's positive or negative based on the language models that they're using, because unfortunately there's some bias in there. I think if we're going to go to what's the answer for this, the answer is networking. The answer is always going to be networking. If you're just relying on sending your resume to every ATS and you're just uploading all day long, I think that's less efficient than finding people that can get you an introduction and get you in the door that way. But it's rough out there right now. It absolutely is.
Yeah, because it seems bizarre that this is just year after year getting worse and worse, and more and more frustrating for people. And it doesn't quite make sense because I feel like in these, and it feels like maybe something is about to break and change for one side or the other, because you still feel like, well, I still hear that there's this environment of employees are demanding more from their employers, for a better work-life balance. While at the gates, there's 700,000 people banging to get in. It seems like we're at a precipice of something where the tables are about to turn. And it's kind of strange that the tables haven't turned already, because if there are so many willing applicants, how is it that the people employed are able to demand more while there's someone standing outside, let's say, willing to work for less or half, or, just getting for anything at this point?
I agree. It's incredulous at this point. I mean, I got blasted on LinkedIn recently because somebody had put this post on about, and we see these all the time. It's this whole debate about return to work, right? So am I going to be remote or going to be in the office? And I think, for a lot of industries and organizations, the pandemic taught us that we can be productive, not in a brick and mortar location. But now, after the post-pandemic, a lot of organizations are mandating return to office, whether it's hybrid or full-time. And there's various reasons for that, right? Some will say, well, it's culture and we want to be face to face. A lot of it has to be with sunk costs into real estate, right? At the end of the day, my position was it doesn't matter. It's their business, period. They can make the rules, they could do whatever they want. And that was the point I made. I'm not agreeing with what they're doing, but I'm saying I understand it. And we have the option of A, not working there, or B, starting our own business, right? There's options. I'm not saying they're great options, but there's options. And I just got crushed in the comments. You're the problem, thinking that way, allowing employers, and I keep going back to, this is the society we live in. They're taking the risk, they're making the investment, they're providing a service. You're providing the service for that, but you're recouping some of the rewards from a payment and insurance and things of that nature. So to me, I find it fascinating that people think they can make demands of their employer. I mean, I really wish we were in an equitable relationship situation where the employees held as much power as the employer, but I don't think that's ever going to be the case. I think good employers will look at that not as a power dynamic, but as an opportunity. How do we create a great business? It's by ensuring we have happy, well-trained, capable, engaged people that are excited about what we do, are aligned with what they do, and want to help move us forward. I don't think you can do that if you just say, I don't care if you don't want to drive to the office, you're driving to the office. Or I don't care if you think this benefit is more important, we're not even going to have a conversation about it. I think that's a bad leadership decision, a bad management decision, but it's their decision to make. I just don't see we're at a point where the employees have, because to your point, 20, 30, 40% of the workforce says, you know what, if you don't give this to me, I'm going to leave. Well, there's thousands of people waiting to take their place, to come in and fill that slot. They might not be trained. It's going to have a negative impact, but the organization will continue. I've never seen any one person be that critical to the success of an organization. We are always replaceable. And it's an interesting conversation that I see happening way too often online right now.
Yeah, it's very well put. It's tricky because as I am 100% for more work-life balance, and even if we were to head towards a more European way of working in the United States, I'd take it every day of the week. That being said, it just seems that the the levels as to which people are negotiating don't align. And that's what seems almost worrisome, that something's going to break eventually in this dynamic, where employers are going to realize, like what you just said, hey, we don't need to put up with this. And then we're going to kind of flip to a way where employers are demanding maybe too much out of employees with not enough benefits. And that could be the opposite is very bad as well for everyone.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
agree.
kind of it's an interesting situation that feels like it's going to change, because it just doesn't seem sustainable from a negotiation platform or standpoint. At least, if they're kind of yelling up at the employer, and for some reason the employer is listening, even though they have no real reason to, based on the job market. So it's a little concerning that is the trend, only because it doesn't seem sustainable, as much as I may agree with the tenets of the movement to have a better work-life balance. It just seems that it's not sustainable in that regard.
I absolutely agree. And my position as a people leader has always been, I set the tone for the culture in my work group, in my team, in my department, in my division. I'm less concerned about the organization. I'm more concerned about what environment I create. So for me, from a work-life balance standpoint, and I have this conversation with everyone I ever hire, and I tell them, write this down, underline it, bold it, because you're going to come back to it 6 months, because I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to believe this. But I don't care what hours you work. I don't care what time you come in. I don't care what time you leave. I don't care if you're at the gym. I don't care if you're at Starbucks. I care, did you get your job done? That's all I care about. And admittedly, I have salary people working for me, but I want them to be happy. I mean, happy employees are going to do their job. And I tell them all the time, look, I want you to be so comfortable that I'm gonna ask you to do something, and you're gonna look at me and go, Keith, that's the stupidest thing that anyone's ever asked me to do. I'm not gonna do it. I want to do it this way. And I'm gonna go, great, tell me more. And they're like, I would never talk to you like that. I'm like, wait 6 months. And then sure enough, that's because that's how I want to work. I want to be hired because I feel valued. and I'm providing value. I want to feel listened to. You don't have to take my counsel. You don't have to do anything with what I'm telling you, but you hired me for a reason. So at least listen to what I have to say. And if you're not going to listen to what I'm saying, then what am I doing here? Like, why would you even need me? So no matter what the culture is or what the business thinks, I think, it comes down to the individual level. What do you want as an employee? What are you looking for? How do you lead? How do you show up? Do you allow people to be who they are? So I think when people are looking, and I know people are desperate for jobs, but don't be so desperate for something that you're working for the wrong person, and then you're miserable and you're looking again in 3 months. So I think that's just a key component of business success, is that manager-employee relationship. And is the power dynamic skewed because you have a manager that feels I've earned this title and I'm going to treat it as such because that's the way I've seen it? Or is it a manager that realized the only way they're going to be successful is by inverting it and supporting that employee and removing the roadblocks and making them successful? And I think that's a very important distinction.
That's a great, very well put, and I think that's a great place to end it for today. I know you have a great leadership program going on. If you don't mind filling people in on what you're up to.
Yeah, thanks. The leadership development program was pretty cool. We were trying to replicate a classroom experience for people that are never in a classroom, and we couldn't get into a classroom. So it's basically, we refer to it as an asynchronous development course. And again, it's broken into knowledge, practice, application, and there's an AI component that allows people to take the training on their own time, to then do these different activities and exercises, and then record their responses to different things and to each other, and provide feedback to the recordings of each other. So if you and I are in the same program, the same cohort, we could take things weeks apart, but still provide each other feedback and support. And it seems to be working real well. The other thing that I do is I have a workshop that I run. It's affectionately known, going from order taker to trusted advisor. And it's really because I just grew so tired of people coming to me and saying, I need a training program. And to me, it's like someone walking into the doctor's office saying, hey, doc, I need a discectomy. It's like, well, how'd you get there? Like, back up 20 steps, right? So I wanted to change the dynamic and change the conversation. So this workshop helps HR people, L&D people retrain their stakeholders to come to them to say, hey, I need your help. I don't know what I need, but let's talk about what I'm looking for and let's see what we can do together versus, hey, I've got this problem. Let's just throw training at it. So those are the two major things I focus on. I am on my own on kamconsultinggroup.com, which is it's Kam Consulting Group. It can be found at kamconsultinggroup.com. And all the services that we provide are there. And we love helping learning and talent leaders make their businesses succeed through people development. And that's really what we're all about.
Awesome. Well, Keith, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I think there's a lot of really great tidbits in here that people are going to love. And
Hopefully, I enjoyed it.
everyone, please check out Keith. He's got a great program going on, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from him a bit more. All right, take care,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.